The United Nations Children's Fund in Nigeria says at least 1 million Nigerian children could miss school this year because of insecurity, as schools in the north of the country have been targeted by armed groups in a mass series of kidnappings for ransom. According to Unicef, Nigeria has recorded 20 school attacks this year alone, and 1,436 students have been abducted. The report also shows that 16 students have been killed and 200 remain missing. UNICEF's country representative, Peter Hawkins, is therefore calling on Nigerian authorities to prioritize security at schools, stating that it is unacceptable for communities to be worried to send their children to school over fears that they will be abducted.
Now, joining us to discuss this is the Chief of Field Office, UNICEF, KANO and SOKOTO Field Offices, MAULID WARFA. Okay, let's get this started. We're looking at the UN and the WHO and how things are actually playing out. Please bring us up to speed, I must say.
Yeah. No, first of all, thank you very much, Hawa and Aaron. It's very interesting that the now safety of children and the impact of the insecurity to children is becoming now an interesting topic. And I think you're right, as the press statement indicated, we are concerned as UNICEF that even though September is usually the month of joy for many, many children, we're a bit concerned that quite a lot of children, at least about 1 million, will not go to classroom. And even though a lot of effort were made by the government, the fear, the stress, the panic that is there to parents and to children, that if their children go to school, they will not come back home, is a serious issue to everyone. And UNICEF is concerned, and that's why we put up the press statement.
Now, with the current state of insecurity in the nation, it seems like a lot of children are going through a traumatic time, especially when they get kidnapped and then they return. Is there any kind of advice or watch points for parents who are scared for their children to go back to school, and ways that they can educate them without having this fear?
It's very unfortunate reality that parents and children are to be prepared for what's to expect, and there's no amount of word or advice that would soothe a mother who have to send her 6-year-old kid to school and is worried that will my child come back home or not. But I think the best advice that UNICEF is advising is to the government, to the security institutions, to the state leaders, that we prioritize safety of schools. We could, if we work together very closely, establish or safe school initiative where communities are interconnected with the schools, where security institutions could support school safety, where safe routes could be established for children, where early warning system could be established. And I think it's all of us to put our hands together and put school safety as a priority. We also advise communities and students and schools to have all the preparedness and planning that's needed to be put in place in case unfortunate event do happen. There's a lot of trauma, a lot of stress, but there's also the physical injuries and possibilities of death, as you've seen. About 17 children were killed in the past few months alone, and it could happen. So I think it's not one size fit all advice, but I think people who are on the ground have better knowledge of the situation, and mothers and school communities are the best to advise. But I think the system needs to be there to support these schools and make sure children are safe, and parents have the systems in place in the event unfortunate reality happens. And when children are even rescued, you can't imagine the trauma, you can't imagine the stress, you can't imagine the anger they have. I met some parents in the past whose children went through this traumatic, unfortunate reality, and they cannot complete one statement without breaking down. You cannot imagine your 7 years old child being taken away, or your 14 years old girl taken away. The pain and the trauma is unimaginable. And therefore, looking into the huge impact, the gap of schooling would have to the country economically, is one thing to look at, but also the long-term economic and security impact of when schools do not continue providing helpful socialization to the children that could have to the students. And mind you, just to conclude my emotional statement, that imagine when children at secondary education lose hope for education, and lose hope and get upset with the reality that is in there. What will happen to them? Imagine how powerful and painful that could be for the safety and security of the country.
All right, Maulid, the UN published a report which states that 18 months into the COVID-19 pandemic, schools for nearly 77 million students in six countries continue to be almost closed. 77 million, that's a lot. Which countries are worst affected by this?
Well, it's a global nightmare, and global pandemic. And I think higher the population of the country it is, higher the number of children that are not going to school. And if you look into the global countries that have the highest population, and if you look into Africa, I think Nigeria becomes one of them. I cannot give you exactly country by country rate for students that miss out of school, but what I can tell you is in Nigeria, is one of the countries that is being hugely affected by both the COVID-19 school closure, but also, unfortunately, the insecurity that is happening today in our coffins.
Now, you spoke earlier about early warning signs and preparedness and all those things to combat this before it starts. I'm wondering if there's any, systems that UNICEF might be putting in place in order to deal with the traumatic effects these children would definitely be dealing with.
Yes, UNICEF is working with the government. We're working with the state, different entities. And one of the things we do is establishing a mental health support system, psychosocial support structures. For example, children from Kankara and other children from other places in Samfara, UNICEF had partnered with a partner, and that partner is supporting children with psychosocial support together with their parents to see how the traumatic effect can be reduced. I think that is one part of it. The second part of it is UNICEF is working with the government at all levels to work with on how to keep schools safe. And you remember, not that long ago, there was a huge conference that discussed school safety initiatives, and government putting a lot of promises and priorities to keep schools safe. And I hope that will yield a lot of results, and international development partners are willing to partner with UNICEF and with the government to keep our schools safe, because schools are they are centers of socialization, they are centers of civilization, they are centers that provide education for futures, and that education helps the country for centuries to come. Imagine if we miss many children out of education, we're losing a lot of talents and a lot of young people who would never know, maybe would be replacing you and me and the president and other ministers of the government. And I think that's where the pain with the parents is so deep.
MAULID, WARFA, thank you so much for sharing with us all those things that we discussed, and we wish you the best.